Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. What I want to talk to you guys about today is how to choose the color of the lures that you're going to be throwing this spring. Really, this information applies all the time, but since it's spring, that's what we're going to talk about. Color selection can be, frankly, really overwhelming. There's so many options on the market. I mean, how do you know what's going to work, what's not going to work? So how do we simplify it? How do we break it down in a way that when you get out on the water, you can very rapidly fish with confidence? There are some simple things that we do. Now, going into this right from the start, I do need to warn you, Tim is on vacation. That's why you guys are watching this video a little bit late today. That's why it wasn't up at 5 in the morning like normal. You know, when things are left in my hands, sometimes it gets a little haywire. But in all seriousness, Tim's gone. So because of that, you're not going to be able to zoom in on these baits like we normally do. But what I'm going to do to make up for that, down in the video description where we always put links to each bait so you know where to find them, with those links, I'm going to give you the exact colors of each one. So say it's the Pointer 128 in Nishiki. When you click on that Pointer 128 link, you'll know you're looking for Nishiki or another color. Tackle Warehouse has those big, vivid pictures, so you'll know exactly what we're talking about. So let's kick this off. How do you choose color? You have so many options. The first thing that I want you to do is simplify. For most baits, for anything without a blade, you're basically going to try and get a bait into 3 categories. The first is a ghost color or some sort of a see-through transparent color. The next is going to be something with some flash to it. And the last is going to be something that's primarily white. Now, if we were going to add a 4th one in, that's when we'll go to a Nishiki or a clown style color, something with a little bit of chartreuse. But that is a distant 4th. Your main 3 are going to be ghost, flash or chrome, and then something like a chartreuse shad, something that's white or bold in the water. Now, how do you know where to start? It really comes down to watercolor. Depending on your watercolor, you're gonna start with one of the 3. You're also going to be impacted by the light. Today we had a low light day. That will make a difference. But we'll start with ghost. Most of the time, I start with ghost. The reason for that, it's the most natural presentation in the water most of the time. The exception is going to be if you've got some stain to the water. Now, something else that you need to understand about stained water or murky water or muddy water, whatever you want to call it, it's different in every lake. And what I mean by that is, out here in the West, we have some reservoirs that are crystal clear most of the time. In those reservoirs, if visibility drops down to, we'll say, 3 to 5 feet of visibility, they start turning away from ghost. They won't need it anymore. You start looking at a chrome or a white base or a clown, chartreuse style bait. But in the next reservoir, where the water is normally 3, 4, 5 feet of visibility, they'll love that same ghost pattern, and they won't stop eating it until you get down to a foot or a foot and a half of visibility. And in other places where water is truly stained, where your best visibility all year is a foot and a half, 2 feet, they'll eat a ghost color right down to 6 inches to a foot of visibility. So really what that boils down to is that the fish are adapting to their surroundings. They're used to whatever visibility they have. So when they start to lose that visibility, that's when you start transitioning between colors. So if you're going lake to lake, at one lake you have 6 feet of visibility and they will eat it. The next lake you have 6 feet of visibility and they won't eat it. Don't get hung up on that. Don't worry about it. You need to treat each lake fresh and new. But again, rule of thumb, I'm going to start with ghost. Most of the time, that's my most productive color. It's the most natural in the water. It's the most neutral. So the fish are the most likely to pick that up. Now, if the water starts to get some stain to it or some color to it, that's when we'll start going to something like a chartreuse shad. That chartreuse shad is going to just stand out more boldly in the water. Now, on a sunny day, if that water is stained, that chrome finish, that flashy color like American shad, that color is going to stand out and do really well, because as the sun is shining through that murky water, it'll be picking up that flash. Now, on that note, let's transition over to some baits that have blades on them. Anything with a blade, they'll work rain or shine, does not matter. But you typically, now again, I'm only speaking for myself, right? I can't speak for everybody. I can just tell you my experiences on the water. My experience on the water is that the brighter it gets and the clearer the water gets, the smaller I prefer my blades. I think that's because the flash isn't so in your face. It's not so intense, so they'll eat it even in that brighter sunlight. But if you have stained water, you might want to try going to gold. Basically, your options are silver, white, or painted blades, whether that's a spinnerbait, an underspin, a chatterbait. Typically, you've got those 3, maybe 4 colors, right? You got silver, gold, and then for painted, it's usually white or chartreuse. Silver, 100% of the time in clear water for me. That's just me, but 100% of the time. And then as the water is, as the sun is getting higher, smaller and smaller and smaller blades. When I get stain in the water, when I start getting down in that, depending on the lake, 6 inches to 2 feet of visibility, that's when I transition over to that gold blade. Seems to get a little bit better flash in that water. They're more attracted to it. And then the painted blades, those white blades, chartreuse blades, that's when we're truly talking about muddy water, 0 visibility, 6 inches of visibility, on some lakes a foot. That's where those seem to shine for me. But that's really all there is to it. Now that sounds like a lot, right? So we're gonna recap it, and I'm just gonna run through it in a little bit simpler fashion. Rule of thumb, always start ghost. If you're throwing a bladed bait, rule of thumb, always start silver. Now again, you may live on a lake where you get out there and that doesn't work perfectly. So pay attention on the water. And if what I'm telling you doesn't seem to be meshing, doesn't seem to be working, immediately transition to the next color. If that water is muddy, you turn to that white base. Same thing with that spinnerbait or chatterbait or anything else, that white base. If it goes truly muddy, I mean muddy, then you start looking at your chartreuse. Now, personally, something I like to do when I see those conditions, I still may not truly go chartreuse, but I may go gold blade, like we talked about, and then use some dip and dye. And I'll put a link to that down there in the video description as well if you're not familiar with that product. But you can take a regular colored bait, throw that chartreuse accent onto it, and get it to work in that muddier water, call those fish a little bit further. And then same thing with the hard baits. When it starts really getting murky, we'll go to that nishiki. Depending on the brand, it's either nishiki with Lucky Craft or clown or some variation of that. Don't get too hung up on the baits. We've already done some videos for you on the specific baits that we'll throw in the springtime to start finding those fish. I'm gonna give you a link down in the video description to that as well if you wanna watch that video. But for these particular baits I'm talking about, I will give you a link to each one of those, including the colors, to make it a little bit simpler. So one more time, start with ghost, or if you're throwing a bladed bait, start with silver. The murkier it gets, you transition into those solid colors or into gold, and then into chartreuse and bold white. Pretty simple. You're gonna find out very quickly when you get out on the water which colors they want and which colors they don't. So don't worry about buying 100 different baits. I know that spinnerbaits come in 72 different colors. I know that an LV500 comes in, I don't know, a lot of colors. And you need 3 of them. maybe 4 of them if you want to branch out a little bit. Keep it simple. And if you're really on a budget, start with Ghost and go from there. It's really that easy to build confidence out on the water and to start catching fish. I hope that helps you guys. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We've already passed that 40,000 subscriber mark. We're shooting for 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We appreciate your support. We'll keep bringing you the videos, and we'll talk to you soon.